A wealthy tech millionaire hired a poor woman to be his girlfriend, but when she spoke at dinner, everyone was shocked. Aldridge, a reclusive tech mogul, needs a date for a high-stakes dinner. Enter Harper, a charismatic barista with a mysterious edge. As their charade unfolds, buried secrets and hidden motives come to light. What happens when their fake relationship becomes dangerously real? Dive into a world where appearances deceive and true intentions are revealed. Will their unexpected connection lead to heartbreak or a new beginning? The hum of the machinery in Axiom Innovation's research lab was a sound that I had come to associate with progress, with success. The quiet, relentless rhythm of robots in motion, AI algorithms running tests, and engineers fine-tuning prototypes. It was music to my ears. This was my empire, built from the ground up, a testament to what can be achieved with sheer determination and a refusal to be defeated. Yet, despite the achievements that surrounded me, there was a hollow feeling that lingered just beneath the surface, one that no amount of success could fill. I was 38 years old, a tech mogul with more money than I could ever spend, and more power than I had ever imagined possessing. And yet, I found myself standing alone in the massive, sleek office that overlooked the city I had conquered, with no one to share it with. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the polished floors, and the silence in the room was deafening. "Luna," I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. Luna, my housekeeper, appeared in the doorway almost immediately. She was a small woman in her early 50s, with a kind face that seemed perpetually caught between a smile and a look of concern. She had been with me for years, longer than anyone else in my life, and had become a fixture in my home, a presence that was comforting in its consistency. "Yes, Mr. Aldridge," she asked, her tone as warm as ever. "Have you eaten?" I asked, glancing at the clock. It was late, and I knew Luna often waited until I was done with my work before taking care of herself. "I'll eat after I'm sure you've had something," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. I sighed, knowing that arguing with her was pointless. "I'll take care of it. You don't have to wait for me every night, you know." "It's not a burden, Mr. Aldridge," she said with a small smile. "You work hard, and someone has to make sure you're taking care of yourself." I nodded, not in the mood to press the issue. Luna had been looking after me for so long that it felt like a part of our routine, one that I wasn't quite ready to change, even if I didn't always appreciate her motherly concern. "Is there anything else you need?" she asked, noticing the way I was staring out the window, lost in thought. "No, Luna. That'll be all for tonight," I said, my voice trailing off as I turned back to the view of the city below. The lights were coming on, illuminating the skyline that I had grown so familiar with. It was beautiful in its own way, but it always felt cold and distant to me, much like the life I had created. "All right then. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything," Luna said, sensing that I needed to be alone. She paused for a moment, as if she wanted to say something more, but then thought better of it, and quietly left the room. Once she was gone, I let out a deep breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The room felt even larger, more empty without her presence. It was ironic, really. I had all the space I could ever want, yet it felt like a prison sometimes, a prison of my own making. I walked over to the large floor-to-ceiling windows and stared out at the city that never seemed to sleep. The truth was, I had never imagined my life turning out this way. As a kid growing up in a poor family, I had dreamt of success, of making a name for myself, of escaping the confines of poverty. But in those dreams, I had always envisioned having someone by my side, sharing in the victories and the setbacks. Funny how life doesn't turn out the way you expect it to. I muttered to myself, my breath fogging up the glass slightly. The memories of my college years drifted back to me, those early days of ambition, of believing that I could have it all. And then, of course, there was her. The woman who had set me on this path, though I hadn't realized it at the time. The one who had broken my heart, and in doing so, had unwittingly given me the fuel I needed to become the man I am today. But the success I had achieved had come at a cost. I had thrown myself into my work, shutting out everything else, including the possibility of love or companionship. I had convinced myself that it was a fair trade, that the empire I had built was worth the sacrifice. But standing there, looking out at the city, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake. The shrill ring of my phone pulled me out of my reverie. I walked over to my desk and picked it up, recognizing the number on the screen. Lucas, the voice on the other end, greeted me, formal yet familiar. Sebastian, I replied, my tone equally reserved. Sebastian Mendoza was one of the most influential investors in the industry, a man whose backing could take Axiom Innovations to the next level. We had been in talks for weeks, negotiating the terms of a potential partnership. It was the kind of deal that could solidify my company's dominance in the market, but I had sensed that Mendoza was holding something back, waiting for the right moment to reveal his true intentions. I've been thinking about our discussions, Sebastian said, his voice calm but firm. And I believe we're close to an agreement. That's good to hear, I responded, though I knew there was more coming. However, there's one thing I'd like to request. He continued, his tone shifting slightly. I'd like to meet you for dinner next week. It'll be an informal setting, just a chance to get to know each other better before we finalize anything. I'd be happy to, I said, wondering where this was going. And I'd like you to bring someone with you, Sebastian added, his voice taking on a more pointed edge. A significant other. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I wasn't sure I had heard him correctly. A significant other, I repeated, the surprise evident in my voice. Yes, Sebastian confirmed. It's important to me that I understand who I'm partnering with, not just professionally, but personally as well. I want to see that you're grounded, that you have stability in your life. It's a principle I value deeply. I felt a flash of irritation at his audacity. What did my personal life have to do with business? But I knew better than to argue. Sebastian held the cards in this situation, and if I wanted his investment, I would have to play along. Of course, I said smoothly, masking my frustration. I'll bring someone. Good, Sebastian replied, satisfaction evident in his tone. I'm looking forward to it. As I hung up the phone, I stared at it for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. The idea of bringing a significant other to this dinner was absurd. I hadn't been in a relationship in years, and the thought of pretending to be in one for the sake of a business deal felt both humiliating and ridiculous. But I knew that this deal was crucial for Axiom's future, and I couldn't afford to let it slip away. I would have to find someone to play the part, someone who could convincingly pretend to be my girlfriend for one night. It was a challenge, but one I knew I could handle. After all, I had built an empire from nothing. How hard could it be to find a temporary companion? With a sigh, I picked up the phone again and dialed Jenna's number. If anyone could find the right person for this job, it was her. Jenna, I said when she answered. I need you to find someone for me. A woman who can convincingly pretend to be my girlfriend for a business dinner next week. There was a brief pause on the other end before Jenna replied, her tone professional as always. I'll start looking right away, Mr. Aldridge. Do you have any specific requirements? Someone who's intelligent, well-spoken, and can handle herself in a formal setting, I said, my mind already racing with possibilities, and someone who can keep this strictly business. Understood, Jenna replied. I'll have a list of candidates for you by tomorrow. Thank you, Jenna, I said, my voice more tired than I intended. That'll be all for now. As I hung up the phone again, I couldn't help but shake my head at the situation I had found myself in. It was just one more reminder of how far I had come and how far I had yet to go. Success had its price, and it seemed I was still paying it. The following morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, my mind still occupied with the absurdity of the situation I had found myself in. The idea of hiring someone to pretend to be my girlfriend for a business dinner felt surreal, but the stakes were too high for me to back out now. As I entered the sleek, modern lobby of Axiom Innovations, I was greeted by the usual hustle and bustle of employees starting their day. But my thoughts were elsewhere. I made my way to the executive floor, the doors to my private elevator closing behind me with a soft hiss. As the elevator ascended, I leaned against the cool metal wall, trying to shake off the lingering frustration from my conversation with Sebastian Mendoza. The man was a brilliant investor, but his insistence on bringing a significant other to the dinner felt like an unnecessary complication. Yet, I knew that Sebastian was testing me, probing for any weaknesses in my personal life that might reflect on my business acumen. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped out into the corridor leading to my office. Jenna, my assistant, was already there, her sharp eyes scanning her tablet as she efficiently organized my schedule for the day. Jenna was in her early 30s with a no-nonsense demeanor that I had come to rely on. She was one of the few people I trusted implicitly, and I knew she would handle the delicate task I had given her with the utmost discretion. "Good morning, Mr. Aldridge," Jenna greeted me as I approached. "I've compiled a list of potential candidates for your request. Would you like to review them now?" "Yes, let's go over them," I replied, gesturing for her to follow me into my office. As we entered the spacious room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The office was a reflection of my success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city, minimalist furniture in shades of black and gray, and a state-of-the-art desk that held everything I needed to run my empire. But today, it felt like a stage for a performance I wasn't prepared to give. Jenna took a seat across from me and handed me her tablet. I skimmed through the profiles she had compiled. Each woman was carefully selected based on her appearance, background, and ability to handle a high-pressure social situation. But none of them seemed right. They were all polished and professional, exactly the type of woman who would blend seamlessly into the world of corporate dinners and business negotiations. And yet they all felt wrong. I handed the tablet back to Jenna with a frown. "None of these feel right." Jenna raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my reaction. "Is there something specific you're looking for, Mr. Aldridge? I can broaden the search criteria if necessary." I shook my head, frustration creeping into my voice. "I don't know. I need someone who's genuine, someone who doesn't come off as rehearsed or artificial. These women all seem like they're used to playing a part, and I need someone who can be authentic." Jenna nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the tablet. "I understand. I'll keep looking." As she got up to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was asking for the impossible. But as the day wore on, my mind kept drifting back to the problem at hand. No matter how hard I tried to focus on work, the thought of the upcoming dinner with Sebastian Mendoza loomed over me like a dark cloud. I couldn't afford to make a mistake, not when the future of my company was on the line. By the time evening rolled around, I decided to clear my head with a walk. The office had emptied out, leaving the building quiet and still, save for the occasional hum of machinery in the labs below. I left through a side exit, avoiding the main entrance where employees and security personnel might still be lingering. The streets outside were bustling with life, the cool evening air a welcome contrast to the sterile environment of the office. I wandered aimlessly, my thoughts still churning, until I found myself in front of a small coffee shop I often visited on my rare breaks. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, and I hesitated for a moment before deciding to go in. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, and I was greeted by the familiar sight of the cozy, dimly lit interior. A few patrons sat scattered around the shop, engrossed in their laptops or books, and the soft murmur of conversation filled the air. I made my way to the counter, where a young woman with auburn hair tied back in a ponytail was busy preparing an order. "Good evening, Mr. Aldridge," she said with a smile as she noticed me approaching. "Evening, Harper," I replied, surprised that she remembered my name. I wasn't a regular by any means, but I had come here often enough that the staff seemed to recognize me. "What can I get for you tonight?" she asked, her tone warm and friendly. "Just a black coffee, please," I said, my usual order. As she began preparing the coffee, I found myself watching her more closely than I had before. There was something about Harper that caught my attention. Her movements were fluid, confident, and there was a genuine warmth in the way she interacted with the customers. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, yet she had a presence that drew people in. "Here you go," Harper said, handing me the cup with a smile. "Black coffee, just the way you like it." "Thank you," I replied, taking the cup. But instead of leaving right away, I hesitated, my mind racing with an idea that was as unexpected as it was bold. "Harper," I said slowly, "can I ask you something unusual?" She looked up at me, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say might sound completely insane. But there was something about Harper that felt right, something that made me believe she could handle this strange request. "I have a business dinner next week," I began, choosing my words carefully. "It's a very important meeting, and the person I'm meeting with expects me to bring a significant other. The problem is, I don't have one. So I was wondering, would you be willing to pretend to be my girlfriend for the evening?" Harper blinked, clearly taken aback by the proposal. For a moment, I thought she might laugh or worse, tell me I was out of my mind. But instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying me with a mix of amusement and curiosity. "Let me get this straight," she said, her tone light but serious. "You want me, a coffee shop barista, to pretend to be your girlfriend for a business dinner. And you're asking this because I need someone who can be genuine," I replied, my voice steady. "I've seen how you interact with people, how comfortable you are in your own skin. That's exactly what I need for this dinner, someone who can make it look real." Harper's eyes searched mine, as if trying to determine whether I was serious or just messing with her. After a long pause, she leaned back slightly, a small smile playing on her lips. "That's quite an offer," she said, her tone thoughtful. "But why me? I mean, you could hire a professional for something like this, right?" "I could," I admitted, "but I don't want someone who's rehearsed or fake. I need someone who's authentic, and you seem like the kind of person who could pull it off." Harper seemed to consider this for a moment, her fingers tapping lightly on the counter. Then, to my surprise, she nodded slowly. "All right," she said, her voice firm. "I'll do it, but I have a few conditions." "Name them," I said, relieved that she was even considering it. "First," Harper began, "I want to know exactly what I'm getting into. I need all the details about this dinner, who I'm meeting, what the stakes are, and what you expect from me." "Fair enough," I replied, already planning to brief her thoroughly. "What else?" "Second," she continued, "I don't want to be treated like an employee. If we're going to do this, I need to feel like an equal at least for that night. No talking down to me, no acting like you're doing me a favor. We're in this together, or not at all." I couldn't help but smile at her straightforwardness. "Agreed. And the third condition," Harper's smile widened, "I get to pick out what I wear. No over-the-top fancy gowns that make me feel like a doll. I'll choose something that feels comfortable and true to who I am." "Deal," I said, extending my hand. She shook it firmly, her grip surprisingly strong. "Then I guess we have a deal, Mr. Aldridge." As I left the coffee shop that evening, my mind was racing with the implications of what I had just set in motion. It was a risky move, to be sure, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of excitement, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this could work. I had no idea what the dinner with Sebastian Mendoza would bring, but with Harper by my side, I had a feeling it would be anything but ordinary. The next day at work, the reality of what I had agreed to began to sink in. The dinner with Sebastian Mendoza was just days away, and while Harper had agreed to accompany me, the success of the evening hinged on her being the perfect date, a role that was far from her everyday life. I needed to make sure she was not only comfortable, but also prepared for the high-stakes environment she was about to step into. I arrived at the office, feeling a mix of determination and anxiety. As I stepped out of the elevator, I noticed Jenna waiting by my office door, her tablet in hand as always. "Good morning, Mr. Aldridge," she greeted me, her tone professional but with a hint of curiosity. "I assume you're ready to discuss the next steps." "Yes," I said, gesturing for her to follow me inside. "We need to get started on preparing Harper for the dinner." As we entered my office, Jenna took a seat across from me, her expression a mixture of intrigue and concern. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Aldridge? I mean, hiring a barista to be your date for a critical business meeting. It's quite unorthodox." "I know it's unorthodox," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "But I've already made the decision, and Harper agreed to it. Now it's up to us to make sure she's ready." Jenna nodded, clearly still unsure but willing to follow my lead. "All right, what exactly do you need from me?" "First, we need to ensure she understands the stakes," I began. "She'll need to know who Sebastian Mendoza is, what's at risk, and how important this dinner is for the future of Axiom. She also needs to feel confident and comfortable in that environment. So we need to arrange for someone to coach her on etiquette, conversation, and anything else that might come up." "Understood," Jenna said, making notes on her tablet. "I'll find someone who specializes in high society training." "Anything else?" "Yes," I said, pausing for a moment as I considered the next step. "She mentioned wanting to choose her own outfit, but I want to make sure it's appropriate for the setting. We should arrange for a personal shopper to assist her, someone who can help her find something that fits her style, but also meets the standards of a formal business dinner." Jenna's eyebrows raised slightly, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "A personal shopper? That's quite the gesture." "It's necessary," I replied, trying to maintain a tone of professionalism. "I want her to feel confident, and the right outfit will help with that." "Very well," Jenna said, finishing her notes. "I'll start making arrangements. When would you like to meet with Harper again to discuss these plans?" "Let's aim for tomorrow morning," I said, already thinking ahead. "The sooner we start, the better." With that, Jenna left to begin organizing everything, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy about the whole situation. This was unlike anything I had done before, and despite my confidence in Harper's potential, there was still an element of unpredictability that made me nervous. The day passed quickly, consumed by meetings and the usual demands of running a tech empire. But as the afternoon rolled into evening, I found myself thinking more and more about the upcoming dinner. I needed everything to go perfectly, both for the sake of my company and for my own peace of mind. The next morning, Harper arrived at the office, looking slightly out of place among the polished professionals that populated Axiom Innovations. She wore a simple, casual outfit, a pair of jeans, and a comfortable sweater that contrasted sharply with the sleek business attire of those around her. Yet there was a confidence in her stride that caught the attention of more than a few curious glances. "Good morning, Mr. Aldridge," she greeted me as she entered my office, her tone light and casual. "Morning, Harper," I replied, motioning for her to take a seat. "How are you feeling about all this?" She shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Honestly, it's a bit overwhelming, but I'm up for the challenge. It's not every day you get an offer like this." "True," I said, leaning forward, "but I want to make sure you're prepared. Jenna has arranged for you to meet with a social etiquette coach, someone who can help you navigate the dinner with Sebastian Mendoza. She's also set up an appointment with a personal shopper to help you find the right outfit for the evening." Harper raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the lengths I was going to. "A personal shopper? I didn't realize this was going to be such a big production." "It's important," I explained. "The people we'll be dealing with are extremely influential, and appearances matter. But I also want you to feel comfortable and confident, and that's why I'm making these arrangements." She nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I appreciate that. I'll admit I'm a bit nervous about the whole thing, but I'll do my best. I know you will, I said, offering her a reassuring smile. And I'll be there with you every step of the way. Well, if I'm going to be your girlfriend for the evening, Harper said with a playful grin, we should probably get to know each other a bit better, don't you think? I was taken aback by her directness, but she had a point. If we were going to pull this off, we needed to at least appear as if we were comfortable around each other, like a real couple. Good point, I agreed. Let's start with the basics. What do you do when you're not serving coffee to CEOs? Harper laughed. The sound light and genuine. Well, when I'm not serving coffee to CEOs, I'm usually at school. I'm studying to be a graphic designer. I've got one more semester left before I graduate. That's impressive, I said, genuinely surprised. Balancing work and school must be tough. It is, she admitted, but I love design, so it's worth it. Plus, the coffee shop gig helps pay the bills. We continued talking, sharing snippets of our lives. Well, mostly Harper shared, and I listened. I found myself increasingly intrigued by her story, her ambitions, and the way she approached life with a blend of practicality and optimism that was refreshing. As the conversation flowed, I began to feel a sense of ease that I hadn't anticipated. Despite the unusual circumstances that had brought us together, there was something natural about our interaction. Harper wasn't just a random hire. She was someone who brought a different energy into my carefully controlled world, and I found myself appreciating that more than I expected. All right, Harper said after a while, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied smile. I think that's a good start. Now, what about you? What do you do when you're not being a big-shot CEO? I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer. My life outside of work was almost non-existent, and what little free time I had was often spent alone, or with Luna, my housekeeper. But Harper's expectant gaze prompted me to open up, even if just a little. I don't have much of a life outside of work, I admitted. I usually spend my evenings going over reports or planning the next move for the company. When I do take a break, I read or sometimes take walks around the city. Sounds busy, Harper said diplomatically, though there was a hint of concern in her voice. Don't you ever get tired of it? Tired? Sometimes, I conceded, but Axiom is my life. It's what I've built, and it's what I'm passionate about. I get that, Harper said, her tone more serious now. But everyone needs a break sometimes, you know. Even CEOs. I didn't respond immediately, her words lingering in my mind. She was right, of course. But taking a break, letting someone in, it wasn't something I was used to. Still, there was something about Harper that made me consider, even if just for a moment, what it might be like to step out of the rigid confines of my life. Maybe, I said finally, my voice softer. But for now, we need to focus on getting through this dinner. Harper nodded, her playful demeanor returning. Fair enough. So when do I meet this etiquette coach? Tomorrow morning, I replied. Jenna will send you the details, and after that, we'll meet with the personal shopper. Sounds like a plan, Harper said, standing up. I'll see you tomorrow then. As she left my office, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. This was unlike anything I had ever done before, and I knew the next few days would be critical. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just thinking about the business. I was thinking about Harper and the unexpected changes she was bringing into my life. The search for the perfect date had taken an unexpected turn. But as I watched Harper walk away, I couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, I had found exactly what I was looking for. The morning was uncharacteristically warm for early spring as I stepped out of my car and onto the bustling street. The sun filtered through the tall buildings of downtown, casting long shadows across the pavement. I had no particular destination in mind, but the persistent hum of my thoughts and the weight of the upcoming dinner with Sebastian Mendoza made it impossible to sit idly in my office. I found myself wandering the familiar streets, passing by the sleek, modern facades of tech companies and boutiques, all symbols of the city's relentless drive for success. As I walked, I considered the reality of what I was about to do. Hiring Harper as my date was unconventional. No, it was downright strange. But in the world I inhabited, where every move was calculated, I needed something different, something genuine. Lost in thought, I didn't realize where I was headed until I stood in front of a small coffee shop. It was a cozy, unassuming place nestled between two larger establishments, a sort of hidden gem among the towering giants of commerce. The sign above the door read, "The Daily Grind," and the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the open doorway. With a sigh, I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The familiar sound of the bell chimed as I entered, and the warmth of the shop enveloped me. The atmosphere was relaxed, a stark contrast to the cold precision of my office. A few patrons were scattered around, sipping their drinks, engrossed in their own worlds. And there she was, Harper, standing behind the counter, her back turned as she filled a coffee order. She was wearing a simple black apron over a white shirt, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. She moved with a certain grace, effortlessly multitasking as she prepared drinks and chatted with a customer at the counter. I watched her for a moment, unnoticed, taking in the scene. It was odd seeing her here, in her element, surrounded by the normalcy of everyday life. It was a stark contrast to the polished world of business dinners and corporate strategies that I was dragging her into. "Lucas," a voice pulled me from my thoughts, and I turned to see Harper staring at me, a surprised smile on her face. "I didn't expect to see you here. What brings you to this part of town?" "I could ask you the same," I replied, walking up to the counter. "But then again, I suppose this is your domain, isn't it?" She laughed, the sound light and infectious. "Guilty as charged. This is my day job. Well, one of them. Anyway, what can I get you?" "The usual." "The usual?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. I wasn't aware I had a usual. "Most people have a go-to coffee order," she said with a shrug. "But if you're not sure, I can surprise you." "Surprise me," I said, leaning casually against the counter. "I trust your judgment." "Coming right up," she replied with a grin, turning back to the espresso machine. As she worked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of ease that had been missing from my life for a while. Harper's presence, her effortless charm, it was disarming. And for a moment, the tension of the upcoming dinner faded into the background. "So," Harper began as she prepared my drink, "how's the search for the perfect date going? Found anyone more suitable than a barista yet?" I chuckled, appreciating her self-deprecating humor. "I stopped searching the moment I found you, Harper. The only question now is whether you're ready for what's coming." She placed the cup in front of me, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of determination and curiosity. I wouldn't have agreed if I wasn't, but I'll admit, I'm still wrapping my head around the whole thing. It's not every day someone asks you to be their fake girlfriend for a high-stakes business dinner. "True," I said, taking a sip of the coffee she had made. It was perfect, rich, smooth, with just the right amount of bitterness. "But then again, you're not exactly the average barista, are you?" She smiled at the compliment, a hint of a blush coloring her cheeks. "I guess not. But I am curious. Why me? Out of all the people you could have chosen, why did you pick someone like me?" The question lingered in the air between us, and for a moment I considered the many answers I could give her. I could talk about her confidence, her charm, or the way she seemed to defy the expectations I had built around people in my life. But the truth was simpler than that. "Because you're real," I said finally, meeting her gaze. "You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not putting on a facade. You're just you. And that's what I need. Someone who's genuine, who can help me navigate this dinner without all the pretense." She seemed to mull over my words for a moment before nodding. "I can do that. But you should know, I'm not great at pretending to be something I'm not." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "Because I'm not asking you to be anything other than yourself. Just, maybe a more polished version, for the sake of appearances. Harper laughed again, the tension between us dissolving into something more comfortable. I think I can manage that. So, when do we start the crash course on being a tech mogul's girlfriend? Tomorrow, I replied. Jenna's arranged for you to meet with an etiquette coach in the morning, and then we'll work on the rest from there. Sounds intense, she said, though there was a sparkle of excitement in her eyes. But I'm ready. Let's do this. As I left the coffee shop, my coffee in hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. Harper was a wild card, a complete unknown in the structured world I had built for myself. But there was something about her, something that made me believe that this unorthodox plan just might work. And as much as I tried to keep my distance, I couldn't deny the growing curiosity I felt about the woman who had so unexpectedly entered my life. For the first time in years, I was stepping out of my carefully controlled comfort zone, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. But as I walked away from the daily grind, I realized that maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. The following morning, I arrived at my office earlier than usual, the sun just beginning to rise over the city skyline. The stillness of the early hours was a welcome change from the usual rush, allowing me to gather my thoughts before the day began. Today, however, my thoughts were consumed by one thing: Harper. Our encounter at the coffee shop had been unexpected, but it had also confirmed something I had sensed from the beginning. Harper was different. She had a spark, a kind of unpolished authenticity that stood out in a world full of people who were always trying to be something they weren't. It was that very quality that made her perfect for the role I needed her to play. But now, the real challenge began, convincing Harper to fully commit to this plan, to dive into a world that was foreign to her, and to do it convincingly enough to fool one of the most shrewd investors I had ever encountered. I spent the morning going over the details with Jenna, my assistant, who had arranged for an etiquette coach to meet Harper later that day. Jenna, always efficient and reliable, had taken care of everything, from wardrobe selection to the minutiae of dinner etiquette. "Lucas, the coach will be at your apartment by 10 a.m. sharp," Jenna informed me as she handed over a detailed itinerary. "Harper will have the afternoon to get familiar with the talking points for the dinner. We've prepared a brief on Sebastian Mendoza and his preferences. She should be well prepared by the time the dinner rolls around." I nodded, grateful for Jenna's thoroughness. "Good. Make sure Harper has everything she needs. I want her to feel comfortable, even if this is outside her usual realm." Jenna raised an eyebrow, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "Are you sure about this, Lucas? It's not exactly a conventional approach." I smiled slightly, appreciating her concern. Jenna had been with me for years, and she had seen me through countless deals, mergers, and crises. This was different, and she knew it. "Unsure," I replied, a note of finality in my voice. "Harper is the right choice for this. I just need to make sure she knows what she's getting into." Jenna nodded, though I could tell she still had her reservations, but she trusted my judgment, and for now, that was enough. Later that morning, I found myself back at the daily grind, standing just outside the coffee shop, rehearsing what I was going to say. This wasn't a typical business negotiation. I wasn't just asking for a service or making a deal. I was asking someone to step into my life, to play a role that was far more personal than any contract I had ever signed. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door and walked inside. The familiar sound of the bell greeted me, and I saw Harper behind the counter, serving a customer with her usual easygoing smile. As she noticed me, her expression shifted slightly: curiosity, maybe even a hint of apprehension. She finished the transaction and then approached me, wiping her hands on her apron. "Lucas," she greeted me with a warm smile. "Back so soon. I hope you're not here to critique my coffee-making skills." I chuckled, shaking my head. No complaints there. In fact, I was hoping to discuss something a bit more serious. Harper tilted her head, intrigued. "Sounds ominous. What's on your mind? How about we take a seat?" I suggested, gesturing to a quiet corner of the coffee shop. She nodded, removing her apron and signaling to a coworker to cover the counter. We sat across from each other, the small table between us, and for a moment, I felt the weight of what I was about to propose. Harper seemed to sense my hesitation, her expression softening as she leaned forward slightly. "Lucas," she said, her voice gentle, "you don't have to be so formal with me. Just tell me what's going on." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'm asking a lot of you, Harper. This dinner with Mendoza, it's crucial for my company, for everything I've built, and I need you to be by my side, to play a part in it. But I also want you to understand what that means." She listened intently, her gaze never leaving mine. "You need me to pretend to be your girlfriend," she said, more a statement than a question. "I get that. But what's the catch? What aren't you telling me?" I admired her directness, her ability to cut through the pretense. "The catch is that this isn't just a one-time thing," I admitted. "Mendoza is meticulous. He's going to watch our every move, scrutinize every detail. This means you're not just playing a role for one night. You're stepping into a world that's very different from yours. High-stakes business, constant scrutiny. It's not easy." Harper leaned back in her chair, considering my words. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Why me, Lucas? I know we talked about this before, but I need to hear it again. Why not someone who's already familiar with that world?" "Because those people come with their own agendas," I replied honestly. "They have their own interests, their own games to play. I need someone who doesn't have a stake in this world, someone who can be genuine, who can keep up appearances without getting caught up in the mess. And because I think you can handle it." She studied me for a moment, her eyes searching mine for any hint of insincerity. Finally, she sighed and nodded. "Okay, Lucas, I'll do it. But I need to be clear about something. I'm not going to change who I am to fit into your world. I'll play the part, I'll be convincing, but I won't pretend to be something I'm not. I wouldn't ask you to," I assured her. "All I need is for you to be yourself, just with a bit more polish, as we discussed." She smiled, a mix of determination and nervousness in her expression. "All right then, let's do this. But you owe me a lot of coffee after this is all over." I couldn't help but laugh, the tension between us easing slightly. "Deal. Consider it a lifetime supply." We shook hands, sealing our unlikely agreement. As I left the coffee shop that day, there was a strange sense of anticipation in the air. Harper was stepping into a world that was as foreign to her as it was familiar to me, and yet I had a feeling that she might just be the missing piece in this complicated puzzle. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of something other than calculated certainty, something that felt like hope. The following week felt like a whirlwind of activity. Harper and I were preparing for the dinner with Sebastian Mendoza, and the meticulous planning that had become my routine was now intertwined with an unexpected new dynamic. Harper herself. I had scheduled daily briefings with her to ensure she was prepared. Every afternoon, Harper would come by my apartment, where we'd run through mock scenarios and review Mendoza's profile. Our interactions, once formal and businesslike, began to feel more relaxed. Harper's natural charm and ease were starting to draw me out of my usual reclusive shell. One afternoon, we sat in the cozy confines of my living room, surrounded by various notes and documents. Harper was sprawled on the couch, looking more comfortable than she had at our initial meeting. Her casual demeanor contrasted sharply with the seriousness of our task. "Lucas, you keep looking at me like I'm about to perform brain surgery," Harper joked, glancing up from the notes I had provided. "Trust me, I've done this kind of thing before, though not exactly in a high-stakes business dinner setting." I smirked, setting down a document. "I'm not worried about you performing brain surgery. I'm more concerned about making sure we don't accidentally embarrass ourselves in front of Mendoza. He's known for his sharp observations." Harper chuckled. "I think you're giving me too much credit. I'm just a coffee shop worker trying to keep up with the fancy world of high finance. But thanks for the confidence boost." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "You know, for someone who's supposedly out of their element, You've picked this up quickly. I wouldn't have guessed you'd be so adept at handling this. Harper gave me a crooked smile. Well, I suppose when you're faced with the choice between coffee spills and high-stakes dinners, you learn to adapt. I laughed, appreciating her lighthearted approach. Exactly. And if you can handle me and my endless list of business jargon, you'll do just fine with Mendoza. The evening of the dinner arrived faster than I expected. I was anxious, but Harper seemed remarkably calm. I had arranged for a sleek black car to pick us up, and as we stepped out of the apartment building, Harper looked elegant in a deep blue dress, her hair styled in soft waves. I was struck by how seamlessly she had transitioned from our casual meetings to the polished persona she was now embodying. Ready for the big night? I asked as we entered the car. Harper flashed me a confident smile. As ready as I'll ever be. But just so you know, if I accidentally spill wine on Mendoza or say something ridiculous, it's on you. I shook my head, laughing softly. Noted. I'll make sure Mendoza knows that it's all part of the charm. The restaurant where the dinner was being held was a high-end establishment with dim lighting and an air of exclusivity. As we walked in, I could feel the change in atmosphere immediately. Elegance, sophistication, and a hint of old-world charm. Mendoza was already seated at a table near the window, looking out over the city lights. He stood up as we approached, his gaze assessing us with a mixture of curiosity and approval. "Lucas, it's good to see you. And this must be Harper," I interjected smoothly, "my date for the evening." Harper extended her hand with a genuine smile. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Mendoza." Mendoza took her hand, his eyes lingering on her with an approving nod. "Pleasure to meet you, Harper. I've heard quite a bit about you. Please, have a seat." We settled into our seats, and the evening began with small talk and pleasantries. Harper seemed to navigate the conversation effortlessly, engaging Mendoza with her wit and charm. I watched from across the table, a mixture of relief and admiration swelling within me. At one point, Mendoza leaned in slightly, directing a question at Harper. "So, Harper, tell me, how did you and Lucas meet? I imagine it's quite the story." Harper smiled, a sparkle in her eye as she responded. "Well, Lucas and I met under rather unusual circumstances. Let's just say that it involved a bit of serendipity and a lot of unexpected twists. It's been quite an adventure since then." Mendoza chuckled, clearly intrigued. "I like a good story. Lucas, you certainly have a knack for attracting interesting people." I shrugged with a grin. "You could say that. Harper has a way of making even the most mundane moments seem extraordinary." As the evening progressed, I found myself increasingly impressed by Harper's ability to handle every curveball Mendoza threw her way. She was articulate, engaging, and had an effortless way of steering the conversation in a positive direction. It was as if she was not only playing a role but actually enjoying the experience. By the time dessert arrived, the mood had relaxed significantly. Mendoza was clearly pleased with the evening's proceedings, and the atmosphere was one of mutual respect and enjoyment. Harper glanced over at me, her eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "So far, so good, right?" I nodded, raising my glass in a small toast. "So far, you've exceeded all expectations," she grinned, taking a sip of her wine. "Glad to hear it. I'll take that as a compliment." As the night drew to a close, Mendoza stood to leave, his expression warm. "Lucas, Harper, thank you for a delightful evening. It's been a pleasure getting to know both of you." Harper stood as well, extending her hand once more. "Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. It's been an honor." After Mendoza had left, I turned to Harper, a smile of genuine appreciation on my face. "You were incredible tonight. I couldn't have done this without you." Harper shrugged modestly, though her smile was proud. "Thanks, Lucas. It was a fun challenge, and I think we managed to pull it off." As we left the restaurant and headed back to the car, I couldn't help but feel a new sense of camaraderie with Harper. What had started as a mere business arrangement had evolved into something more meaningful. In that moment, walking beside her in the cool night air, I realized that perhaps this unlikely partnership had opened a door to something more profound. Something I hadn't anticipated but was starting to embrace with a sense of curiosity and hope. The evening of the dinner with Sebastian Mendoza had finally arrived, and the tension was palpable. The prestigious restaurant where the dinner was to be held exuded sophistication, with its softly glowing chandeliers, polished wooden floors, and a subtle, elegant decor that seemed almost timeless. I was dressed in a tailored suit, my nerves masked by an outward appearance of calm. Harper, beside me, was wearing a sleek black dress that complemented her effortlessly. The dinner was scheduled for 7 p.m., and we arrived promptly. As we walked through the entrance, I felt a familiar wave of anxiety mixed with anticipation. The success of this dinner was crucial, not just for the immediate investment, but for the future of Axiom Innovations. Sebastian Mendoza was already at the table when we arrived, a tall figure in a sharp suit, his presence commanding attention. He rose from his seat as we approached, his smile both warm and calculating. "Lucas, welcome," Mendoza said, extending his hand. "And you must be Harper. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Harper offered a graceful smile and shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. It's great to be here." We settled into our seats, the ambience of the restaurant setting a formal yet relaxed tone. Mendoza was seated at the head of the table, with Harper and I across from him. The waiter arrived shortly after, presenting menus and taking our drink orders. I could sense Mendoza's keen interest in our interaction as he observed Harper with a mix of curiosity and approval. "So, Harper," Mendoza began after the initial pleasantries, "Lucas has told me a bit about you. What's your background?" Harper took a sip of her wine, her demeanor confident. "Well, I come from a modest background. I've worked in various roles, but my most recent job was at a coffee shop. I've always believed in taking on new challenges and learning from them." Mendoza nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. And what made you decide to take on this particular challenge?" Harper's eyes sparkled with a hint of amusement. It was a unique opportunity, and honestly, I was intrigued by the idea of stepping into a different world for a while. Plus, I'm always up for a challenge, especially when it involves helping out someone who seems to need it. Mendoza smiled, clearly impressed. "Lucas, it sounds like you found someone who is not just good at playing a role but genuinely engaging." I chuckled, nodding in agreement. Harper has been an invaluable asset. She's handled this whole situation with much more grace than I anticipated. As the appetizers were served, the conversation flowed naturally. Mendoza was engaging, asking thoughtful questions about Axiom Innovations, and Harper seamlessly integrated herself into the discussion, offering insights and anecdotes that made her seem like an integral part of the evening. At one point, Mendoza turned his attention to me. "Lucas, you've been quite the enigma in the tech world. What drives you to keep pushing boundaries in AI and robotics?" I took a deep breath, ready to articulate my passion. It's a combination of personal ambition and a desire to make a meaningful impact. Growing up in a challenging environment, I saw technology as a way to not just change my life, but to help others as well. It's about solving problems and creating opportunities. Mendoza looked thoughtful. "I can see that drive in your work. And Harper, what do you think of Lucas's vision and the company's direction?" Harper glanced at me, then back at Mendoza. "From what I've learned, Lucas's vision is ambitious and transformative. It's not just about technological advancement, but also about making a positive difference. I think it's admirable." The main course arrived, and as we dug in, the conversation continued to ebb and flow smoothly. Mendoza was particularly interested in Harper's perspective on various topics, often directing questions her way. It was clear he was gauging not just her compatibility with Lucas, but also her insight and demeanor. Midway through the meal, Mendoza leaned in slightly, his tone more casual. "Harper, tell me something. What's been the most surprising aspect of this dinner so far?" Harper laughed softly, her eyes twinkling. Honestly, it's been fascinating to see how seamlessly everything has come together. I didn't expect to enjoy this so much, but it's been a real eye-opener. Mendoza's eyes sparkled with genuine interest. I'm glad to hear that. It's always refreshing to see people embrace unexpected opportunities. As dessert was served, the atmosphere remained light and convivial. Mendoza seemed more relaxed, clearly enjoying the evening and the company. Harper's ability to handle the evening with such ease and charm was not lost on me. She had become more than just a hired companion. She had turned into a surprisingly effective co-host, making the dinner feel less like a business obligation and more like a genuine social occasion. When the time came to say our goodbyes, Mendoza stood up, extending his hand once again. "Lucas, Harper, this has been a truly delightful evening. I appreciate your time and the engaging conversation." Harper shook his hand warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. It was a pleasure to meet you." I followed suit, offering a firm handshake. "Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to continuing our discussions." As Mendoza left the restaurant, Harper and I remained seated, reflecting on the evening. "Well," Harper said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied smile, "I think we did pretty well." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief and gratitude. "You were fantastic tonight, Harper. I couldn't have asked for a better partner for this." She grinned, her eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "Glad I could help. And who knows, maybe this won't be the last time we find ourselves in an unexpected situation together." As we left the restaurant and headed towards the car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie with Harper. The evening had not only been a professional success, but had also brought us closer together in a way I hadn't anticipated. It was clear that this unlikely partnership had the potential to evolve into something more meaningful, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope and connection beyond my usual solitary existence.